So I touched upon this page. I think the right-hand side is what really differentiates people. So in my experience, right, I've seen folks coming in with really, really strong Excel modeling skills, or really, really strong presentation skills. A lot of people were very well trained in consulting or banking or, their previous corporate jobs. And that really make a great first impression, and it helps them to have the ground running really quickly once they come into the organization. And those skills really matter. And it matters more before AI because those are the skills you own, right? You can make the quality of the work really good. And then it still matters today. I think knowing what good looks like can help you to refine the output from AI, right? Personally, I think there is still a big gap between good and great on the content that the AI is providing. But what really matters in the long term, the more you grow, because most of the folks would probably come in a IC3 or IC4 role, individual contributor, level 3, level 4 in most of the companies. Sometimes senior folks graduating from MBA might join us IC5, right? But the more you grow into the 6, the 7, or into the leadership, or the super ICs I talked about, I think it's the right-hand side that really, really matters. And in one of the wisdom from the field slide from a team member from my older team, she's really awesome. She talked about how important it is to build that trusted relationship with your partners, with your sales stakeholders, cross-functional leaders. Because sometimes a lot of those decisions, there's no black and white, right or wrong answer. It's about the choices you make, right? So how would people trust the choice they are making with you together? How would they trust your advice or your suggestions sometimes? A lot of times it comes down to the relationship, and it comes down to how you are seeing their needs, seeing what they are struggling with, and how you are communicating with. So again, ultimately, it's a deeply human job. The other thing I would mention is about who thrives in those roles. That's not on the slide about the skill set, but I think more about the mentality is whether this person loves solving ambiguous problem. Do they enjoy ambiguity because they can create all kinds of possibility, be creative, come up with their own story, their own solutions? Or do they struggle with it? Do they need a very narrow definition of the problem or job, right? That usually sets people apart. And another key thing is, can they adapt very quickly with the changes? Because oftentimes we are in the backseat helping the leaders to shape the organization, shape the business. That could mean reorg. That could mean really big direction change. That could mean really big, technology changes in this world. And sometimes it might be small things like, okay, you were told to do this one thing first. 2 hours later, they told you to do another thing, right? So how do you feel about those quick changes that is part of the reality of the job? That matters to keep anybody feel grounded and feel energized continuously in the role versus being burned out. I think there are a couple of ways. A lot of those skills on the right-hand side, to your point, it's very hard to prove on resume, right? So you could share your experience of the project. Let's say you worked on a project that informed the business about an X million, X billion business, ideas, or you helped a leader to restructure their organization, right? Or you helped them to build an annual plan, whatever it is, whatever your bullet example is. If you can mention like how many functions you were working with, right? You achieved this goal through working with the sales, the product, the marketing, the legal, the HR, like whatever functions you were working with. That gives a sense of the complexity of the project, the role that you were dealing with on your resume. Another thing I think we mentioned in the example is mentioning a specific number, the impact of the project or the decision you were making that again, like talks about the impact of it. But honestly, I think as a leader, as a manager in the past who recruit a lot of people, this is the area where I spend a lot of time in interviews by asking them questions like, okay, can you tell me about a time when you influenced a stakeholder about a decision you didn't agree with, right? Or can you tell me about a time when your project took a turn midway, either, it was delayed or the project direction suddenly changed, or whatever the problem was, how did you manage it, right? Or like, can you give me an example when you were asked to work on a project with tons of ambiguity? What did you do in that situation? So those are the typical questions I ask to explore the person's soft skills in those areas, and then really see how they work through those situations and those problems with their skills and their mentality. That's also a great question. Yeah. I think there are different school of thoughts as well. What you're asking about charisma also makes me think of a very typical thing that people usually test, like a cultural fit, right? And there are different school of thoughts. Should we test the cultural fit in the interview? Is it a bias, right? If you want to build a diversified team, do you want the people who look like the people already in your teams, potentially successful, or do you want to look for people who bring different culture, different charisma, different style, different knowledge? Personally, for me, I don't really look for charisma while I was interviewing folks, but I do look for that mentality and that chemistry, if I may say, right? Because I always say the job interviews are a two-way street. Many people think they are interviewing for the job. They have to show a version of themselves that matches what the organization looks for. And if that is your goal, sure, I'm sure people can prepare themselves really well to tailor to whatever that role, that organization, that manager is looking for. But personally, I think for folks to be really successful and to really enjoy the work they are going to join later, it's best to show your true self. Like, talk about your own story in a truthful way, talk about your value, your opinion in a truthful way. And because you are also interviewing them, I think a lot of people's ideas are excellent, right? And sometimes those excellent ideas may not be appreciated because it's not in the right place. So if you show yourself in a truthful way and you got the role, you're going to thrive just by being you. But if you like try to show up in a different way that wasn't really you, you might struggle down the line finding that the system or the culture or the team vibe you joined was not necessarily the one you were looking for. And that actually matters a lot in the fulfillment and the happiness for a lot of people in their career. So I don't know if this is a most helpful advice to your question, because I personally don't test those charisma really. But if I have to give a straightforward answer, I think it comes down to how you really communicate and the stories you share as examples when those questions are asked. Always be confident in yourself. Always show up and communicate in an executive-rated way. So I usually tell people to prepare your answer as if in an elevator pitch. Try to give your answer in a very short, concise way, as if you are running in an elevator with a leader. And then start from there and let them to decide whether they want you to expand the story. So I get this question a lot. I will talk about the reality, and I will talk about my suggestion for folks who are interested in this role, right? So if we go back to this slide on the core skill set, the background, the profile that come to mind if you look at these skill sets are the following, right? The consultants, people from consulting, because they are really skilled in stakeholder management, in creating frameworks. They are analytical very often, right? They have great communication skills. So consulting first. Second, banking. Either it's IBD or equity research, any banking functions that involves analytical work, involves real execution. That's something that I really value when I was a hiring manager, right, in S&O. Right? Sometimes the consultants are really great at the framework, but they need to grow in the hands-on execution. And the people coming from banking or coming from actually thirdly internal operations who have already done a lot of those things in other companies have more experience on that side of the house. So those three profiles, consulting, banking, and people who already have done S&O type of job, or even if it's not a sales S&O, but generally operations type of role, even for other functions in a certain company. Those are the three profiles that are pretty common for S&O teams to look for. And as a S&O leader, recruiting manager, oftentimes I would like to build a diversified team. Right? Because people bring different skill set, bring different perspectives. I would probably want to avoid it to have a team full of consultants or full of banking analysts or full of people who have just done it already. And we might lack innovation, like outside perspectives. Please know that no matter what your current profile is, where you sit right now in your career, there is a possibility, there is a chance that you could bring very unique value to the team that already exists, and you could complement them from either your skill sets, your perspectives, your ideas. One thing people always ask me is, oh, if I'm not in consulting, if I'm not in banking, or if I'm not from those big tech S&O type of roles, do I still have a shot in getting a role into S&O? And then the answer is yes. I think you always have a shot. Of course, the probability level changes, but I always encourage people to not to close the door for themselves. There's always something you can offer, and you can always try to build your skills in those areas. I think now with AI, it can help you to prepare the interviews, to tell your stories really well that match what those companies are looking for. If you are interested, you could also create opportunities for yourself, even as a side project or as a learning course that you guys are coming over here to help build your knowledge, build your skill sets that prepare you for those down the line. Everyone's profile, everyone's situation is different. So if you ever need some tailored advice based on who you are, where you are, you're welcome to get in touch with me so I can give more tailored coaching for you.